This is Mr. Wesley, and there is a specific demand running underneath nearly every marriage that fails after 50, and most men never see it coming because it is never written down anywhere, never spoken aloud as an explicit request, and never appears on any list of marital obligations anyone actually handed them before the wedding. It is the demand to be known, not loved in the broad and general sense. Most of the men I work with genuinely love their wives and would say so without a moment's hesitation if you asked them directly. Known, tracked, genuinely registered on an ongoing basis as a specific and particular and continuously changing person rather than as a familiar and reliable fixture of the household. That demand exists quietly inside every long marriage, whether either partner ever names it out loud, and the men who fail to meet it consistently, across years rather than weeks, are overwhelmingly the men who eventually find themselves sitting across a kitchen table from a wife who has stopped asking to be known, because asking, in her experience, stopped producing anything worth the cost of asking. Stay with me, because in a few minutes, I am going to give you the precise mechanism by which this demand operates beneath the surface of an otherwise functional marriage, the specific and measurable way it accumulates into a debt that most men cannot see accruing, and the 4 concrete behaviors that distinguish a man who is genuinely meeting this demand from a man who only believes he is. There is one distinction in particular between providing for a person and knowing a person that I want to land clearly before this video ends, because it is the distinction most men over 50 never had explained to them in any form that was actually useful. I am Mr. Wesley. This is Relational Insights. Let me show you exactly how the invisible demand operates, because it is invisible only until you know precisely what you are looking for. Here is the mechanism, and I want to give it to you with real precision, because vague descriptions of this dynamic are part of why men keep missing it. Early in a relationship, being known happens almost automatically, with no discipline required, because everything about the other person is still new, and attention toward them is effortless. You notice what she orders without thinking about noticing it. You notice the specific thing that makes her laugh versus the thing that makes her roll her eyes and look away. The brain is doing this noticing for you, because novelty itself produces attention as a kind of free byproduct, the same way anything new in your environment automatically pulls focus without you having to decide to focus on it. Years into a marriage, the novelty has done its work and is gone, and the noticing that used to happen automatically now requires deliberate effort, because the brain has long since finished building a working model of her and has shifted into running that model on autopilot rather than continuing to update it in real time. This is not a character flaw. It is simply what brains do with anything sufficiently familiar. They compress it into an efficient summary and stop spending energy re-examining it. The model is efficient. It is also, by its very nature, stale, because she has continued changing in 100 small ways across the years that the model has not been refreshed to reflect. And what she experiences on the receiving end of that stale and unrefreshed model is a very specific and very particular kind of loneliness. The loneliness of being responded to as a category rather than as the person she has actually specifically become. He is not unkind to her. He is not absent in any way a stranger could point to. He is simply responding to a version of her that is several years out of date, with no malice in it at all, which somehow makes it harder for her to name as a problem rather than easier. This is the invisible demand in its simplest form. Keep updating the model. Keep noticing the actual, current, continuously changing person standing in front of you, rather than relying on the efficient summary you built of her a decade ago and have been running on ever since. It is exhausting in a way that providing financially for a household is simply not exhausting, because financial provision has a natural endpoint each month, and a number on a statement you can verify and feel satisfied about. Genuinely knowing another person has no comparable endpoint. There is no month where the knowing is finished, and you can rest on what you have already learned. It simply continues, week after week, for the entire duration of the marriage, demanding the same ongoing attention in year 25 that it demanded in year 2. Most men were never told this was part of the job description. They were told to provide. They were told to be faithful. They were told to show up, to be reliable, to keep their word. Nobody sat them down and told them that showing up also included the considerably harder and much less visible task of continuously relearning the specific person standing in the kitchen. That the marriage required not just his presence but his ongoing curiosity, renewed deliberately rather than assumed automatically. Let me give you the 4 specific behaviors that distinguish the man who is actually meeting this demand from the man who sincerely believes he is meeting it but is not, because the gap between believing and actually doing is exactly where this dynamic does its quiet damage. The first behavior is the unprompted question. Not the question that arrives because something forced it. A fight, a milestone, an anniversary dinner where the occasion itself demands conversation. The question that arrives on an ordinary Tuesday for no reason at all, except that he was curious. Picture this. There is a man I know whose wife told him, several years into a difficult stretch in their marriage, that the moment she knew something had genuinely shifted between them was not a grand gesture or a counseling breakthrough. It was a Wednesday evening when he asked her, completely out of nowhere, what she had actually been thinking about on her drive home that day. No occasion prompted it. He simply wanted to know. She told me that single, ordinary question did more to convince her the marriage might still have a future than anything either of them had said in the 6 months prior, because it was evidence, small, specific, undeniable evidence, that he was still paying attention to her as a person, rather than managing her as a fixture of his life. The second behavior is listening for updates rather than confirmation. Most men, when their wives speak, are unconsciously listening for confirmation that the existing model is correct, rather than listening for information that should revise the model. She mentions she is tired of something she used to enjoy, and the comment passes by unregistered because it does not fit the existing summary of who she is. The man who is actually meeting the invisible demand catches that comment, holds onto it, and lets it genuinely update what he believes about her, even when the update is inconvenient or unexpected. This is harder than it sounds, because the brain resists revising efficient models even when better information is sitting right in front of it. The third behavior is remembering without being told to remember. Not birthdays and anniversaries. Those are managed by calendars and reminders and require no genuine attentiveness at all. The smaller things. The specific book she mentioned once in passing that she wanted to read. The friend she was worried about 3 weeks ago. The man who brings that detail back up unprompted, weeks later, is communicating something that no gift and no scheduled date night can communicate nearly as effectively, which is that she occupies actual ongoing space in his attention, rather than only the scheduled space the calendar assigns her. The fourth behavior is tolerating her becoming someone slightly different than she was. This is the one most men resist without realizing they are resisting it, because a wife who is changing is, in a very real sense, less convenient than a wife who has stayed put inside the model he built of her years ago. The model was comfortable. It required no further work. A wife who develops a new interest, a different opinion, a changed perspective on something she used to feel certain about, is demanding that the model be redone, and the man who experiences that demand as an inconvenience rather than as an invitation is the man who is, slowly and without any dramatic moment marking it, falling behind the actual person he is married to. The marriages that survive in good health past 50 are not, in my observation across years of working with men in this exact situation, the marriages where the man was naturally gifted at all 4 of these behaviors from the start. They are the marriages where the man came to treat this as a discipline rather than waiting for it to arrive as a feeling, where he built the habit of asking a real question on purpose, with no occasion demanding it, and where he trained himself to actually listen to the answer, rather than simply waiting his turn to speak again. That discipline is small. It is, frankly, almost embarrassingly small when you describe it out loud in a single sentence. And it is also, in case after case I have observed, the entire and complete difference between a wife who still believes the asking is worth doing and a wife who quietly closed that particular account years before anyone else in the house noticed it had closed. If you are listening to this and recognizing the gap in your own marriage right now, I want to be specific about where to start, because vague resolutions to do better are precisely what produces no change at all. The place to start is not a dramatic gesture, not a weekend away, not a long overdue conversation about the state of the marriage that puts both of you on the defensive before it has even begun. It is one specific, genuine question this week, asked with no occasion behind it, and with the actual intention of hearing the answer, rather than checking a box you have privately decided needs checking. That is the entire demand. It was never asking for more than that. It was only ever asking for exactly that, applied consistently, for as long as the marriage continues to exist. Drop a comment. Men, when is the last time you asked your wife a genuine question you did not already know the answer to, and what actually happened when you did? Subscribe to Relational Insights. Every week, Mr. Wesley breaks down what actually erodes long marriages after 50, and what it would specifically take to interrupt that erosion before the asking stops for good.